Hello and welcome to the Messed Up to Setups podcast. I am comedian Michael Halcomb, and today I have the great privilege of chatting with a fellow comedian. Her name is Diya Shivlani. Diya, it's good to see you and good to have you on the podcast.
Hey, Michael, thanks for having me.
Everything seems so messed up, but it's just our setup.
Looking forward to diving into hearing, some of your comedy journey. Let's just start with some of the basics. Where do you live? Where are you from?
So I now live in Houston. I am originally from India, and then when I was in my teens, I migrated to Australia, and then I moved to the US in 2023. I did have a short stint in the US in Connecticut before that, but that was like 11 years ago.
So the India to Australia to the US. How did that work? Why did you end up in Australia?
I feel like it's a rite of passage to get to the US. It's like US.
A lot of Americans feel like it's a rite of passage to leave the US.
How did I get to Australia? Well, so in India, we typically you get married pretty young, especially the women. So my parents were like, I either need to go and like study and, study further or get married. And I was like, I'm definitely going to study further. But I liked the country, so I stayed and I ended up meeting my husband over there. And then 16 years went by so quickly.
Wow. So you guys been married 16 years now? 14 years. All right. You have kids?
Yeah, I've got 2 kids.
All right. Teenagers or on the verge of teenagers or what?
Yeah, twins. One's 7 and one is 9.
All right. That can be hard. You've been married 12 years, you got a couple kids, and you're in Houston. So, I mean, of all the places you could have gone in the United States, why Houston?
Well, so the company I worked for in Australia, they acquired a company in Houston and, they asked about more. But I've got an interesting story. So in 2022, we were actually in an accident and I fractured my back. And then 2 months later, our house got burgled. So they literally like took everything. And then when we walked in, my kids were quite traumatized. And, my daughter was really afraid to go into the house. And then 2 months later, our neighbor got murdered by a burglar, and we were among the first witnesses to see him. So it was all so traumatic that I told people at work, and I was like, look, if you can relocate me to any place that's safe, where my kids will feel safe and, where the crime is low, I just want to get out of here. And they were like, are you interested in moving to Houston? And I was like, did you not hear me say safe? But anyway, we ended up coming here.
So the robbery and all that happened in Australia?
Yeah, it happened in 2022. So it took a year to actually move, but it was just too much, like, one after another. And then we just needed a clean break. Yeah.
The murder, the burglary. Wow. Yeah, that's a lot to deal with. And then moving you to Houston on top of that. Wow. That was probably the most traumatic part of the experience. Now, Houston's interesting city. I've only been there a couple of times and boy, the humidity was intense in Houston.
It is. But we're expecting snow here in the next couple of days. So actually the kids have the next 2 days off. So 3 days of staying at home. Is they're expecting 4 inches of snow.
Okay. So you've been in Houston, and when did the journey into comedy, stand-up comedy start?
So when I was back in India, when I was around 18, I did a couple of Indian movies. And then, at that point, my dad didn't want me to continue. So I stopped. And then when I moved to Australia, I got into improv. So I was part of an improv troupe. We performed at a bunch of festivals and I started doing some commercials there. And so I started comedy with the improv bit. And then I had kids, it all stopped. And then last year when I moved to the US, I got back into acting. And then when I was doing one of the comedy audition, actually, one of the agents said, oh, I think you should try stand-up comedy. And I was like, I have nothing to lose. So I went to one of these comedy clubs in Houston. They were having one of those bucket pulls where you put your name in. So my friend put her name in, I put my name in, and then I was the first one to get called to actually start the show. So the first time I'm ever doing stand-up, and I'm the first one to perform for the night. And it was like a 3-minute set, but I really enjoyed it. And then after that, I just started doing more open mics. And then I did a course as well online. And then through that, I started getting bookings. But I'm actually getting most of my bookings in LA. less in Houston. So I do go to LA at least like twice a month to do shows.
Wow, so you're just flying out there?
Yeah, I just fly to LA and do my shows and come back. And also my acting manager, she's based out of LA, so I meet her and if there are any auditions or things like that.
So you're an actress. So when you were in India, you were acting. Was that like all I really know of Indian movies is the Bollywood stuff? Kind of what you were doing, or
Yeah, well, it was so Bollywood is in Hindi, and then there's another language called Tamil, which is like the state I was in. Because India has so many different languages, right? Like each state has a different language. So I started doing that, and actually, I was getting some really good offers back then when I was 18. And in hindsight, I wonder if that's something I should have pursued. But my dad wasn't too keen. And the university I went to in India, they had a strict policy of not acting. And yeah, and at that time, I was kind of figuring things out. I wasn't sure if that's what I want to do, but now I know that's exactly what I want to do. Yeah.
wow? So you're acting now. Is your dad approve, or
Yeah, I mean, now I'm old enough to make my own decisions, but my dad's fine with anything. Actually, my dad's here with us in the US right now. So I think he'll be fine with it once I'm successful. But I haven't quit my day job yet. I work in information technology in tech. So yeah.
okay? That is the most stereotypical Indian job ever.
Is it? Because I'd say being a doctor is probably the most.
I mean, I don't know. It's a toss up between those two.
I actually did study medicine in Australia. I studied medicine and then like I was 3 years into becoming a doctor. And at some point I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm cut out for medicine. So then I left.
Oh, that's funny. So you've just been doing stand up for about a year?
Yeah, I'd say less than a year. I started in October. So, but I used a lot of my improv skills into stand up. And I don't know if that's for better or for worse, but yeah, stand up. So it'll be a year in October, but about 6 months. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. That's awesome. So I did in October, November. So that was interesting. I don't know if those skills really transferred to the stage, but it was just like a 6 or 7 week class, improv. But I had fun doing it. I'm glad I did it, but I don't know how much it helped with the comedy. I mean, joke writing is a very different thing. So do you engage in much joke writing? Do you sit down like and try to write? Do you have a regiment, like a schedule, a routine?
So I did. I think for like a good 3 weeks, all I did was like write jokes. And now I've got enough material like for an hour, but I've just written it out. And then as you keep working on it, you realize, some punchlines are better than the others. Some jokes work, some don't. And I'd say the improv helps specifically because I've been so focused on joke writing and delivering the joke that the other day someone was like, hey, what happened to the whole physicality aspect of it, right? Which I'd kind of cut down because I'd become a writer, not a performer. And then I realized, that's when the improv bit comes in, when you're like getting physical with your joke. So at this point, I feel like I've written so much content with my jokes. Now I really need to hone them. Like, there's no point just writing them. So I'm kind of working with like certain material. And I feel like, I don't know what you do, but when so far I have like this note, like the notes app on my phone. I've pretty much just written it there and then I've used. But I feel like there's no structure to it at this point. So I want to spend like a week or so just like structuring all of that. But how do you structure your writing?
Yeah, I have a app, like kind of a note-taking app that I use as well. I have a ongoing list of every joke, pretty much every joke I write. And in the program, I can put little hashtags and if I want to search in it, I can or even just any word. So if I use the word like elephant, pull up every joke with an elephant, the word elephant in it. Or if I use a certain hashtag, it'll pull up all the jokes with those hashtags. I find that pretty helpful. I don't have a structured writing time. I just try to write as much as I can. If I can write every day, I try to. In 2025, that's kind of one of my goals, daily writing. And I use Twitter for just posting at least a daily joke, one daily joke, usually about like current events, something in the news. So I kind of force myself. I have a schedule that I have, and I'm at least so far into 2025, 20 days, I've been very on top of that schedule. So I have on my schedules, like, here's what I'm going to write on my blog today or my website. Here's the video I'm going to post today, and here's the joke I'm going to write today. And so I have that all laid out. Like I sort of plan at the beginning of the month, and I just try to make that happen, stick to the schedule. But other than that, I don't have if something comes to my mind, man, I write down my note in my phone so fast because I know I'll forget it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't have I don't sit down at like 10 a.m. every day and write, I don't have that luxury really. So I write when I can. But
I also feel if you set a time to write, you're not going to be inspired in that moment, right? Like random things would inspire me. Like I'll be at the gym working out and then I'll have this thought, or I'll be driving and then, yeah, so I don't really set time to write either.
a lot of pressure to put on yourself, especially if you have another job and a family. It's a lot of pressure to put on yourself to write at a certain time every day. I imagine that works well for some people, but I'm just not one of those people.
Yeah, me neither.
So when I was doing my PhD work, I had to write a dissertation, and even then I couldn't do the like sit down and write at a certain time every day. Like it's just when I had a window to do it, I would do it. Or when, like you said, like inspiration strikes, then you do it, So yeah. Well, what about your husband? What does he think of comedy?
Well, he thinks I'm funny.
Okay.
So that's a start. So I think when I got back into acting, my husband was definitely instrumental in that because he was, he encouraged me to go back into acting. So the stand-up bit came as a little bit of a surprise to him. And then, people think doing stand-up is easy, right? But it really isn't. Like there's so much work involved in not just your craft, but also like networking, getting booked, bringing people. Like it's so much work. So yeah, I guess from his perspective, he questions and I think as Indian people, we all do because we question like the reward versus like the returns versus the investment that you put in, right?
Right.
So yeah, but I ran through some of my sets with him and then, he'll give me feedback and things like that. But at this point, he's just letting me run with whatever I want to, as long as I don't quit my day job.
Similar to my situation. I run jokes on my poor wife all the time, and she doesn't quite catch a break. But my kids too. I'm always running jokes on my kids. I had people here working on our house yesterday, and two guys, working on the house, and I was running jokes on them. Like I'll just try out jokes on people if I'm going through the checkout line in the supermarket. That I'm trying to run jokes on the cashier. It doesn't matter. Like everybody's like a fair game as far as like being an audience.
Well, I guess you're in Hawaii, right? So I guess there aren't that many open mics. You've just got to like make do with whatever opportunity you get. But
Yeah, it's a small scene. So I live on Oahu. That has a bigger scene than any of the other islands. We have probably 2 or 3 open mics a week, believe it or not.
Nice.
But you know what? As a dad, so you can't really be a road comic in Hawaii. It's not where, all the clubs are downtown Waikiki area. But, as a dad, like it's hard to like get out because it's, they're like 7:30 to 10:30 every night, when they have them. And my kids have sports. My kids, I need to get them home from sports and fed. And, I find it really challenging to balance that. But I do try to get to the mics as frequently as I can. But
yeah. Yeah, I relate to that. Like, even I have reduced the number of open mics I attend and I'd go on for shows because sometimes you get a spot at 10 o'clock, at 11 o'clock, and you still have to wake up the next day and get the kids ready for school. I mean, most of the time my husband would do it, but he can't do it every day. So it is, it's much harder. I like that in LA, the open mics start really early. Like they start at 5 p.m. So and even the shows start like 7:30. They're done by like 9. So LA is really good in that aspect. But it's definitely harder when you've got kids to attend all the open mic.
So when you're going into LA, do you stay the night and then come back the next day, or you go fly in and you come back the same day?
Well, I have to stay the night because most of the shows are at night. So sometimes I just fly in, do the show, and literally book like the 6 a.m. flight the next morning. So I pretty much finish the show. I go to the airport. I just sleep on the benches at the airport, and then you need to be at the airport anyway at 4 a.m., right? Like for a 6 a.m. flight. So, but if I'm doing 2 shows, like I'm going this weekend, I've got a show on Friday and Saturday. So then I'll stay the night on Friday. Yeah.
Oh, wow. All right. So you mentioned you have like a booking agent. How does that work? I'm not really familiar. So educate me a little bit on what that looks like.
No, I don't have a booking agent for stand-up. I've got an agent but not for stand-up. I would like to eventually get a stand-up agent as well, but I think it's a while away.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's it's interesting the idea of having a booking agent. I don't know if that's common among comedians. I guess it is. That's one of the business aspects of it I don't really know about. But yeah, so far for me, it's just been like reaching out to, bookers that I know of or doing the sort of legwork myself and trying to get, like, hey, here's a clip of me or here's my website or, whatever. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah. So you haven't been at it that long. Do you see yourself like really sticking with it? You think you'll stick with it?
Yeah, I am enjoying it and I will stick with it, but I'm still trying to figure out the best strategy because initially you had to be really funny, right, to be a stand up. At this point, it doesn't matter how funny you are as long as you're able to bring people.
Right.
Then it's like, then to bring people, you need to have a good social media following. And I, again, only joined social media last year when I started stand up. I wasn't
Yep.
really on social media. Then the question is, build your social media first before, you get into like go full throttle on stand up. And I keep going back and forth between that because, the bringer requirements are pretty high sometimes. So, but stand up definitely something I'm enjoying. I mean, there's two ways to look at it. You can just continue always doing open mics and free shows and things like that. But if you want to make like a career out of it, then there needs to be some sort of strategy. And I'm trying to figure out what that strategy is.
Yeah. That's interesting. I'm kind of in the same boat there. My social media I just launched like 7 weeks ago, so it hasn't been very long. My personal like Facebook account, I have 1,000 friends or whatever. I had an Instagram account, like a Hawaii photography, and it has like 12,000. I guess I should have probably just converted that into a comedy one. I don't know. Those people weren't there looking for comedy; they were there looking for photography. That feels a little underhanded, so I just started a new comedy one, and it's growing slowly. Like you said, networking and all of that. The business side of it all is really interesting. I'm hoping that the business side of it all doesn't like ruin it for me or like sour it for me. You know what I never charged to do photography because I didn't want it to become a business and like kill my love of photography. But then just like trying to keep up with the website and the posting was enough to be like, I'm tired of this already. So I don't see that happening with stand up, but it's a lot of work for sure. Yeah.
How long have you been doing stand up?
So I made a commitment, a self commitment on December 28th of 2023. So I made a commitment 13 months ago to do stand up comedy, but I've been performing for 9 months. So I was about a 4 month window there where, I was just trying to get prepared and work up the courage to go do it. So I took a little class here in Hawaii. It was like a 6 week class. And at the end of it was a showcase. My first like on stage performance. That was in April of 2024. So yeah, I've been at it about 9 months and I'm pleased with how it's gone so far.
Oh, that's good. It is a lot of fun. It's just, yeah, I mean, I question, do I just continue having fun or do I go at it as a career and like,
Like I feel very different than most of the people in the scene are younger partiers, drinking, smoking, like all that stuff. So it's a totally different lifestyle and I work clean as well. It's like, clean comedian, but that's also an interesting aspect of it for me is being so different. Like one of the clubs, it's like a bar, it's just rock and roll, dirty, gritty bar. And I'm like a clean comedian coming into did a set the other night, Dia, and I mean like it's pretty rough.
I hear you. I completely hear you. So again, because I've done stand up in Houston, but also LA and New York, right? I went to New York recently as well. And it's different because what you're talking about, majority of the stand up comedians in Houston and open mics are young, partying. But when I went to LA, I met a lot of people, around the same age as me with kids. I met women. Again, in Houston, I very rarely see women. And but in New York, it was even more interesting because not just women with kids, but I met diverse people from like different nationalities. So I think the bigger markets, you'll definitely feel a bit more included. But then the smaller markets, the tier 2, tier 3, is definitely younger people. And I mean, it's it's not their fault they're young, right? Like we just started late. Yeah. They knew their calling when they were younger. We kind of started late. And I was feeling the same thing over here in Houston. I was like, oh my God. I mean, there's a few people who are older than me, with teenage kids. The majority of them are much younger. But then when I saw the bigger markets, I realized that there's a lot of people starting off in their 30s, in their 40s, some of them in their 50s, 60s even. So it's a question of hanging in there. But the fact that you do clean comedy will actually work in your favor. I mean, I've heard your set and it's hilarious. And clean comedy is so hard. But like eventually when you want to do like church bookings and like corporate events, clean comedy is in a lot of demand. But I can see from a club perspective, it's a lot harder because like, when you're drunk, you don't want to be listening to like clean comedy stuff. Doesn't go with the
And I did my first hour set this past weekend, and it was in a clean setting. It was an interesting scenario. I went up after a band had been playing for an hour. They were doing like, cover songs from the 50s and Elvis, and so it's kind of like have dinner, listen to music, and then the comedian comes up, and I was up there for an hour, and it just killed the whole hour. Like the
awesome.
audience was on. It was my favorite show so far. And yeah, so I realized like the clean comedy works in certain spaces, but there are other venues that the two shows prior to that, the venues were darker, they were grittier, and that's not what they were looking for. So part of it too is just learning the venues, right? And what the venues kind of like expect and what kind of audiences those venues tend to have. So yeah, it's all a learning experience. But I wanted to, as we wrap up here, I'm gonna screen share here so people can see. If you folks watching or listening have a minute, head over to Instagram and check out Diya's Instagram page and follow her on there. It's just Diya It. Nice play on Nike there. Just Diya It. And she's got some clips on there and yeah, some other stuff. So check that out and follow her. And then after you do that, you can head over to Michael Halcom live on there as well. I only have, at the time of recording this, 33 followers. So it's a little sad, but just launched this one and we're trying to get it off the ground. So I have some clips on there as well. So this has been part one of the chat with Diya. And in part two, we're actually going to hear from her about a joke she's come up with and like sort of the origins of that and how it got to where it's at now. And then we'll see if we can make up some jokes on the spot. So that'll be in part two of the episode. But we're going to wrap it up there. Diya, thanks for coming on the Messed Up the Set of podcast. Appreciate it. Yeah, go check out her Instagram and follow her on there. So thanks, Diya.
Thanks for having me. It was so fun.
It's all messed up. Yeah, everything's messed up. We're going from this mess up to the next setup. Everything seems so messed up, but it's just a setup.